So I'm just going to do a quick intro about Damson Cloud and what it is that we do. My name is Fintan Murphy. I'm CEO of Damson Cloud, and we work to kind of reimagine work. So the cloud workspace is one without boundaries, without restrictions of the kind of traditional workspace. And really, it's my job. I work particularly within the change management and business transformation area. And so my job is to really help companies think about the future of work, how we can really break down those silos and barriers within your companies, and just change the way your processes are done. So I work a lot on the sort of people and the process side, and then my technical team work on the technology side. And our mission that we say is to help organizations really leverage the cloud to drive that sort of digital transformation. We've locations in Dublin and London. Obviously Dublin is our headquarters, but at the early days we've been Google partners for over 10 years, and the UK market really was where it was kind of at in the early days. Our three kind of pillars are around migrate, secure, and transform. So within the migrate area, and Merve mentioned this, that we help to de-risk that migration. So often it can be a scary thing to move away from a technology maybe that you're familiar with, whether that's IBM Lotus Notes or Microsoft. And so what we're here to do is just to help companies in that transition and try to make it easier. And also within that process, we do a huge amount of knowledge transfer. So within IT teams, we help to upskill you guys to be Google IT admins, and so that you feel comfortable supporting your end users as well, kind of after the project is done. Security was mentioned a lot, and we feel that the cloud and security go hand in hand. So we want to make sure that your systems are actually more secure when they move to the cloud. And in the early days, it was definitely a more difficult conversation around security. I think now people do accept that you can have a more secure environment in the cloud, but it is something that it is a process that you need to go through, and it is different because it isn't that sort of moat or sort of firewall approach that you used to have in a traditional security sense, where you sort of build a blockade around your infrastructure. Now when your infrastructure is in the cloud, the way security is done is different, and we talk to customers a lot about that. And then the exciting bit for me, you may have noticed I'm excited about digital transformation, that's the bit that I really want to get to, and helping you really leverage your investment within the cloud. Obviously our biggest partner is Google, but we also work with a bunch of other companies like Happio, which is a sort of an internal communication tool, General Audit Tool. These guys are actually Irish. CloudLock, Cloud Manager, Backupify. They're just a handful of the products that integrate with Google and help you to augment your Google environment, and maybe allow you to do more than you can do within the sort of traditional tool. A couple of our customers, the Irish Examiner, I'm going to be talking about them later on. The Irish Examiner in Cork, they actually spoke at our event last year, and I just used them as a little case study of how they've used G Suite and the value that they've kind of brought. We also have Walter Workstations, Cartoons in USwitch, Daft.e guys, which are here. ZPG is a customer in the UK. I'm going to talk about them. Not as well known in Ireland, but they're kind of the Daft.e of the UK. And they have actually implemented Google Voice. Google Voice launched in April, and it launched at a beta, and they've got about 1,200 users, and they've got a huge amount of them now using Google Voice full time. And so I'm just going to talk about that in a little bit more detail. So digital transformation. When we kind of talk about digital transformation, there's a lot of sort of buzzwords around it, and so I like to kind of define it for us here in the room, and what is it that we mean when we talk about digital transformation. So for me, most of the cloud-based tools are trying to push us towards a point where we're more collaborative. That's what they're trying to do. And when we think about collaboration, there's two forms of it. There's synchronous collaboration and asynchronous collaboration. So synchronous collaboration is happening in the moment. So if we're working on a document, and it doesn't, in one sense, when I'm talking about this, it doesn't matter what tool I'm talking about. We could be collaborating by writing on a whiteboard or just talking about something. And then asynchronous collaboration is collaboration with some sort of time delay. So a perfect example would be sending an email via, sending an attachment via email, and someone making a change to it and sending it back to you. You're collaborating with the person, but there's some sort of time delay going on in the middle. And most most cloud-based tools are trying to push us towards this synchronous collaboration. When we heard Merve talking about the tools that Google have, about connecting and sharing, it was all about getting onto a Google Meet, getting onto a Hangout, collaborating on documents. So trying to push us towards this live type of collaboration and making it easier to do that. When we talk about digital transformation, we like to focus on 3 key areas. And we've already talked about them earlier on today. We talk about the technology piece, which apparently nobody in the room has any problems with, so that's great. But there are, it's not technology alone, and often this is where companies fail when it comes to digital transformation. They look at just the technology, and they swap the technology out, and they go, "We've digitally transformed now, haven't we? We're done." I read an interesting stat recently that said 25% of European businesses believe their digital transformation is finished. So they're just done with it now, and they can they can get rid of their digital transformation team. Which when for ourselves in the industry, we try to teach people it's an ongoing process. It's a circular process. You're never done, and so that statistic is kind of funny to us. So we also want to look at the processes, don't we? When we think about implementing the technology, we need to make sure that the processes are put in place to actually change what people are doing. If you don't train people, if you don't look at the processes, they're just going to go back to how they did it before. And then finally, we have the people, and this is where the magic happens in the middle. This is where we actually get the transformation, when the people, the process, and the technology are taken together and are actually worked on together. This is where the transformation happens. Now, we break this down a little bit more in what we call our collaboration map. And I'm not going into an exhaustive list, but I just think this helps people to learn the kind of areas that we look at when it comes to our business. And we will go into organizations and we will look at these different areas. So we might look at the people piece, and we will say, what is it that is stopping collaboration within your organization? So it could be leadership. If your leadership team aren't behind you within your digital transformation journey, then it's not going to happen, is it? If you don't have buy-in from the executive team, then your project is going to have difficulty getting funding and things like that. What's the culture of the organization? Is the culture already collaborative, or is it not? And what we try to do with these areas is sort of traffic light them. So is this an area that's green for you guys and your culture is already quite collaborative, or is it orange, or is it red, and it's an area that maybe we need to look at with you guys and help you guys change? What are the skills? So we talked about that earlier on when it comes to training. If I implement a new tool and I don't train people on it, they're not going to be able to use it, are they? So I need to make sure that there's budget there, that there's support there, and resources to actually train people up and make sure that they have the skills. When we look at the processes, things like the business model is important. What's the structure of the business? Is it a manufacturing company with loads of people who work on the floor, and therefore, we need to make sure that they're engaged with during the process? Or is it an organization where they're all in an office building? So there's different types of business models that companies have. What are the policies and processes? And it was interesting when I asked the question in the little survey that we did with you guys, a lot of people said processes were a challenge. And in the digital transformation or the transformation labs that we do, that's one of the key areas that we look at is processes. I'm going to talk about those later on. And next up, we have costs. Obviously, if you don't make sure that there's budget and look at the costs for a project, then again, you could run into some challenges down the road. And then we have the technology. Obviously, the core tools within a particular business will either enable or hinder collaboration. And that's what we're looking at for all of these. Is it helping collaboration, or is it slowing it down? And then admin and IT, again, if we run into a situation where it's very restrictive, and many of you may have come across shadow IT, where people are setting up Gmail accounts or Dropbox accounts. We have, we do weekly videos on our YouTube channel, which I suggest that you subscribe to, obviously. And one of the most popular ones that we did recently was on companies storing their business critical data in Google consumer accounts. Or Dropbox consumer accounts, or any sort of consumer account. And we come across this every single year. We come across more companies than I feel we should, who are actually setting up consumer accounts and storing their business critical data in it. So this sort of shadow IT is becoming more prevalent within organizations when the tools that the employees are being given don't do what they want. they generally just find a way to kind of go around it, which is interesting. And then the last one is the infrastructure. Obviously, having fast broadband. I know this is always a challenge in Ireland, particularly if I do events down the country, and the frustration around the infrastructure and what's available to you. Obviously, when you're on the cloud, you're trying to help people collaborate. These kind of things are important. So Merve talked about the evolution of the workspace and how the workspace has kind of changed over the years. And is the status quo going to help your company be there in the future or engage with this sort of collaborative change? And what we feel as a company, and we signed up with Google over 10 years ago, and it's been the primary product that we've pushed, is that we felt that Google was a platform for changing behaviors that would basically drive adoption across all levels of the organization. And we looked at the market, and there just was not another tool out there that would provide this sort of collaborative change. And we just felt that G Suite ticked all of the boxes for us and for our own customers in terms of that create, connect, and access. And what we haven't talked about is this fourth one, control, which I know there's a lot of IT people in the room. And what I think Google does really well is it allows end users to have the collaborative, connected technology that they want, while still giving IT admins and the C-suite the control, or the business the control that it requires from a security, administrative, and compliance point of view. So I think it's that balance that I think Google gets really right. So I just want to talk a little bit about the partnership and where we sort of come into it as a partner. Google has a proven methodology, so we often will go in and engage with you guys and sort of excite the organization, the stakeholders. We enable you with deployment of services, and then expand, which is helping you grow out the adoption of the tools, and I'm going to get into the transformation labs in a minute. And then also help you to measure and promote success. Now, a huge part of this is actually the change management piece. And it's really interesting to me because this same slide, when we started working with Google 10 years ago, the change management piece was less than 30%. Because at the time, it wasn't realized that change management was fundamental to a transformational project. It was, 10, 12 years ago, things were very different. I think the iPhone launched somewhere around that time as well. So that will give people an idea of how different technology was. And so I just want to go through the change management piece, because this is a huge part of where we help organizations. The technological bit, our team will migrate your data, all that kind of stuff, and the tools are there to do that. But the change management piece, bringing along the people and the process, that's where you're really going to find the value. Making sure that you've got executive sponsorship, doing things around organizational analysis. So actually analyzing your organization and seeing how ready is your organization to change, and what different areas are there going to be change impacts. So when we change one tool to another, what process is going to be impacted by that? And very often when we do surveys, when we do the organization analysis bit, we'll do surveys with end users. The two or three most important things end users want to know is, when is it happening? Why is it happening? So why are we changing to this tool? When am I getting trained? And how quickly can I get back to where I was? So how quickly can I start to be as productive as I am right now on this tool? Can I get back to sort of breaking even in terms of my productivity? And that's generally, when we do organizational analysis, generally what people want to know. Communication is key, particularly in large organizations. We do posters, videos, as well as the sort of traditional emails and intranet announcements. And the communication piece is key, because it's not just a technological change. You're changing how the organization is going to actually work, and you're trying to change the culture potentially of the organization. Very often we'll be part of maybe even a larger digital transformation piece. And then obviously the training is really important as well. And I have some of the different areas, executive sponsorship. I've kind of covered most of these already. Okay, so kickstarting the digital transformation. One of the ways that we do this is using transformation labs. Transformation labs are it's a tool by Harvard that Google kind of taken and cut down into a half-day workshop. And so it's this sort of innovation workshop. You can actually map it to any technology, and Google have sort of basically created this transformation lab for its own organization. So The three key areas to it are inspire, I'll bring all them up, inspire, discover, and prototype. So the inspire piece is around helping you and your team. We generally take about 10 or 15 people from the company. You're trying to find people from the same department if you can. In smaller organizations, you might do cross-departmental. And you're trying to show them how other companies, other Google customers have changed their businesses and their organizations. And then the discovery piece is around brainstorming out their particular business processes, which is quite interesting because people often haven't had a chance to do that before. And then finally, the prototyping bit is around prototyping a solution for the particular areas that we're looking at. I find that pictures, and generally we're trying to find these sort of what we call quick wins. So you put the processes on, what would be the impact of changing this process? Would it be high or low? And how easy would it be to implement? Would it be really difficult or would it be really easy? And so we're trying to find these ones that have a high impact and are relatively easy to implement so that we can get some quick wins for people when they kind of leave the workshop. I think the kind of pictures probably say 1,000 words, as I say. So this was Waltz to Workstations, and these guys are brainstorming some processes that they want to change, bidding management process, event management, timelines, expenses. So they're brainstorming all the different processes, and then they're mapping them out on here. And then what they did was they chose the training management one, and they've actually mapped out a solution then of what they might use, Google Sites and Google Calendar and Hangouts and et cetera, et cetera. So it's a very interactive, engaging workshop. People often get really excited about these. If we can convince a customer to do one transformation lab, they generally start booking in half a dozen of them with different teams because they immediately, that team realizes value that will often save them dozens or maybe hundreds of hours depending on the process that they've changed. I quite like this example. So the prototyping leads to tangible solutions. And in this example here, this gentleman here, Bart is his name, and he worked for a shipping company where they repaired ship engines, and it was a very, very manual process. So what they used to do was their engineers would go down to repair an engine. They would need to look up some manuals. They would have to leave where they were, and they would have to access them on a tablet, but often they would forget their passwords. There was no single sign-on. They would have difficulty sort of accessing this information. And what they did was they just moved to G Suite. He uploaded 2,000 manuals up to Google Drive. Google automatically OCR'd, which is optical character recognition there for those that don't know, which meant that you could search not just the title of the document, but all of the text within the document straight away. And he was able to share this with his team of about 90 or 100 people. And so this reduced the inspection times for them. And they had, from a single transformation lab, they had an extremely tangible benefit that actually saved them hundreds of hours over time and actually made the employees much happier because they didn't have this sort of going back to find the manual to then go and fix the engine. So my question that I always sort of lead people with is, where do you start, or what is it the tool that makes sense to you? Is it the full transformation? Is it stuff around Google Drive with there's a Google Drive tool you can kind of buy on its own now called Drive Enterprise, or is it the meetings and the productivity around email and